Becca, and welcome to a wrap up of all of the books I read in January. I finished 7 books and I put down 1 book, or I DNF'd 1 book, so I would like to review all of them. The first one that I finished in January, the first book I finished in 2025, is Adrift in Currents, Clean and Clear by Seanan Maguire. And this is the 10th book in the Wayward Children series, and it's a series where generally kids go through these magical doorways. It's kind of a nod to the Narnia books, and they go through these doorways and then they come back to the real world and they really struggle to reassimilate, and there is a magical school where they can go and they can find kids that are like-minded, because all of them have had a touch of fantasy, so they're not able to readjust to the quote-unquote normal world now. However, we now follow Nadia in book 10, and she is born in Russia. Her mother gives her up, doesn't want her. She's born with 1 arm, and she's adopted by this couple who seem to see her as like an object or a doll rather than a daughter, because they put all of these expectations on her, but they don't really connect and love her. And so one day she is near a pond where her pet turtle is, and she ends up falling in, and she falls through into this magical water world. After that, it's a short book, so I don't want to say too much about the world, but I'll go into my thoughts really quickly about it. And honestly, this had a bit of a romance to it at a certain point, and this story could have done without it. It seemed unnecessary. In addition to that, a few of the other books in the series had this real sense of melancholy, of magic and whimsy, and I really didn't feel that about this installment. And the last couple of books in this series have really put me on the fence, and this one solidified it for me. I'm not going to continue reading them anymore. I did like the water world and animal companions in here, but that's pretty much the only thing I liked. I ended up giving it a 3 stars, so it was fine, but it's where I'm happy leaving the series now. Then I read Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's been my favorite Emily Henry so far, and this is about Daphne and Miles. Now, Daphne was dating this guy and Miles was dating this woman. However, the man and woman that they were both dating were long-term best friends, and they've realized actually we're in love with each other. So each of them broke up with Daphne, and then they broke up with Miles, and then they got together instead. And now Daphne and Miles are left in the lurch, and they're like, well, we need somewhere to live because we can't afford living right now. So Daphne moves in with Miles, and so their romance forms. It was immediately enjoyable. It had charisma and great banter. It also had great communication and great discussion, because these characters are obviously suffering a loss of their long-term partners breaking up with them. It somehow sustained and built up side characters with enough depth that they really added to the story. And this book really built a life for Daphne and Miles, as well as building a relationship into it. They really blended well. I hated in romance when there is a huge fight in that 3rd act. So it's called the 3rd act breakup, which is usually key for romance books. And I hate it when that happens, because I look at the characters in these books and I usually go, well, you've just declared how much you love this person, and now you're, based on a misunderstanding, you're breaking up with them, or you're fleeing, or you're not talking to them, and it always grinds me so much. But in this book, there was a misunderstanding, there was a little bit of space, but the characters did talk to each other. So I have a lot of respect for the fact that Emily Henry let them talk to each other rather than completely separating them for weeks on end. So they were just mutually pining and nothing was actually happening. I like that these 2 characters managed to collect themselves and have a difficult conversation. And I was like, this is a great romance, and it's been my favorite Emily Henry so far. I tried a lot of audiobooks this month. It seems to be the way that I get through my reading. The next one I read is A Pumpkin Spice Cafe, which I would recommend to read during the cooler months, but I read it during the Australian summer, which meant that I was reading it when I was boiling hot with the aircon on, and the book was talking about fall and autumn and cozy sweaters and hot beverages, and I was like, this doesn't really gel with the vibe, but overall it was a fun read anyway, so I stuck to it and had a good time. It follows Jeannie, and she leaves the big city of Chicago after an incident with her boss, and she goes, I need to kind of start fresh, and her aunt gifts her the responsibility of looking after the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, because her aunt's like, I want to go on this massive holiday, come and look after the cafe for me, it's basically yours anyway, so you can run it while I'm gone. So Jeannie's like, I've never run a cafe a day in my life, so she's working out how to do that. Meanwhile, she runs into Logan, who is a local farmer, and he's also one of the suppliers to the cafe, and at an ungodly hour in the morning he is dropping off these crates or these boxes in the alley near the cafe, and she's like, am I going to be murdered? Is someone going to break in? Because there was all these weird noises. And she breaks out with a baseball bat only to realize that it's Logan. And he's got that gruff personality, so it was very much a grumpy and a sunshine in Jeannie falling for each other. And Logan seems grumpy on the outside, but he's a character that falls in love very fast. And he's got baggage, which is the last time someone came from out of town, he was going to propose to her. He did in front of basically the whole town, and she shut him down, rejected him, and then left. And so he's like, I don't want the person that I fall for to not be committed to living in Dream Harbor, which is where the Pumpkin Spice Cafe is. So he's worried that Jeannie's going to run, and Jeannie's worried because she's only had short-term relationships and she doesn't know how to commit. And so both of them decide that they don't want the whole small town watching their relationship because everyone knows everyone, and they then form a secret romance. And you know just from that agreement that it's not going to work out the way that they want it to. It's going to blow up in their faces. I did enjoy their connection. I enjoyed their conversation and their characterization. I liked how impulsive and ridiculous Jeannie could be and how grounding Logan was. I liked how they balanced each other out. But like I said when I was talking about funny story, in romance there is usually that third act breakup. And in this case there was a third act breakup because these characters just blew up and made assumptions about each other and went their separate ways for like a week. And I was like, this is so annoying. I hate it when that happens. They did make up, obviously it's a romance, it ends happily, but it's just so frustrating when characters can't talk to each other. Make your third act breakup something a bit more interesting and deep, please. There was also an alpaca in here named Harry Styles, which I personally found quite hilarious. But anyway, aside from that frustrating third act, I gave the book 3 stars because I did surprisingly have fun with it. It was recommended by TikTok, and usually TikTok books are not my thing at all, but this one was enough to be just a fun time. The next one though, I keep reading romantasy and it keeps not working out for me. So I tried A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen, and this one is really popular, and I thought, oh, I'm going to try another foray into romantasy because I really loved Fourth Wing. I'm trying to find other romantasy and it's just not working. Our main character in this one is the wife to an abusive husband, and he's got so much power because he's got this magical ability that can pull fish from the surrounding oceans and rivers, and that is what they use for their wealth. So he pulls the fish out of the ocean, she prepares them, and then they sell them at market, and that's how they get their wealth. He can also benefit from having this ability because he can make other people not able to fish. So he hoards all of the wealth in this town, and he also has obviously an awful personality. When the book opens, he is shown holding a knife to our main character's face in order to threaten her because she's not doing a good enough job, and she's talking back to him, and in her head she reveals to the reader that he has been sleeping with her for over 12 months against her consent, and we know what that is called, and yet she has been taking this contraceptive secretly that he doesn't know about, so it's all okay because she won't fall pregnant. And I was reading this and going, I already hate this setup. And then this abusive husband, to punish this main character, he pulls all these fish out of the ocean unnecessarily, so she now has a surplus of work to do, and then he leaves. So she's trying to throw these fish back into the ocean. While she's doing that, she accidentally flings a fish into the face of this hot guy, realizes how attractive he is, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is the love interest. He's a very attractive warrior that just suddenly appeared on the ocean. Cool. And I'm honestly just done with stories like this. The sexual assault, the random hot guy, the abusive character, it's not really my thing, and I don't like it as a setup to a romantasy book. So I put this down very early on at 2%, and it was my only DNF for January. Then I did my reread of Iron Flame, which on my reread I also gave 4 stars to, and I love this romantasy book. Unlike Fate Inked in Blood, this was a fun romantasy, and I think it's pretty much been everywhere. So everyone probably knows it's about Violet, who is going to become a dragon rider, joins this version of a magical school called Basgiath, and she then has to survive. It's like a Hunger Games situation, but for becoming a dragon rider in this school. And the politics and the romance are really unfolding further in this installment. That said, the story was fantastic, but it felt like it was held back by the length of the book. It could have been a bit shorter in terms of getting to its point, at least in the first half, because there's part 1 and part 2. So first half could have just been shrunk a little bit, especially because it felt like I was reading this forever. Also the communication in here. So there was a bit of miscommunication between Violet Violet and her love interest. And it felt like after book one, her character regressed a little bit because her trust was broken in book one. And so now she's become self-doubting and she's withdrawing a little bit. And she was so steadfast in book one, and that's why I really loved her. And then in this one, like I said, she took a bit of a step back. And at a certain point, she's accusing the love interest of not communicating with her, but then she's going off and doing things as well and not telling him that she's doing them. So in a way, she's feeding the own miscommunication in here. And I liked it when they actually finally had a conversation about it and they were like, we need full disclosure and we need trust. So that was really one of the reasons, that and the length are the reasons that I couldn't quite give it a 5 stars. It was still a really fun book, and I'm really happy that I reread it because I enjoyed the sequel to this so much. But yes, 4 stars, really enjoyed myself, had a great time. I also did a recap of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame before the third book came out, Onyx Storm, and that recap has blown up. At the time of filming this, it's got over 80,000 views. And like I said, I'm so glad I reread Iron Flame because there was so much detail in there that I completely would have forgotten before starting Onyx Storm. So my reread really came in clutch for not just me, but for a lot of other people. Then I tried another Emily Henry, and that was People We Meet on Vacation. I think it's got various titles depending on whether it's UK or US published, so I'll just put a cover on the screen and then you can find out what the title is. And this one is another romance, but it's more of a second chance romance. So it's about Alex and Poppy, and they met in university and they became friends even though they're vastly different people. They really just clicked and they understood each other, and every summer they would go on vacation together. And now they've had a bit of a falling out and you don't really know why, but they're just starting to reconnect at the beginning of this book. So as they're reconnecting and their friendship is a little bit fragile, they decide to go on this one last trip. And Alex surprises Poppy by saying yes. So both of them go on this trip, and it's just before Alex's brother is getting married. So they're meeting up on the trip and then going to the wedding afterwards. And Poppy is just an absolute mess. And they realize that they are attracted to each other, and it takes them so long to acknowledge. To be fair, they have a lot of years of baggage, but I also just, I don't know, something about this book just rubbed me not quite the right way. I guess it was maybe the format, because we would get the current information of where the characters were now, and then we'd also get flashbacks intermittent throughout the story. And I guess I just don't like flashbacks. I'd rather my story to be chronological. So maybe that was part of it too. And then these characters would really run from themselves, and that frustrated me too. I do like the ending and the resolution. Again, there was a little bit of that, trepidation, that miscommunication, but I feel like that's got to happen in every romance in order to quote unquote make it work. So I gave this one a 3.5 stars, and I wish I could have given it higher because I really like Emily Henry, but I think this is going to be my least favorite Emily Henry. Mostly because when I was reading this, I didn't feel like I was enjoying it all the time, and sometimes I would feel exasperated. But really that's the main gripe I had with it. Then I decided to just go ahead and read something very romancy, and I picked up That One Night, which is a 2-hour prequel audiobook to the hockey romance Pucking Around. So when you get the audiobook Pucking Around, I didn't realize that That One Night was also part of the beginning of that audiobook. So I put off borrowing Pucking Around, and I just borrowed separately That One Night, and then I had a big waiting game for Pucking Around. So I am reading Pucking Around right now and I'm enjoying it, but I started off with That One Night and then had to wait. Anyway, that is a long-winded way to say that Pucking Around will be my February wrap-up, not my January one, but I digress. That One Night was about Rachel, and she fell in love basically overnight with a one-night stand with this guy, Jake, and both of them are, I think, in Chicago actually, and they are there for various reasons. So Rachel is there for her brother's wedding, and Jake is there to meet up with his sister. His sister's flight gets cancelled, and Rachel has to leave her brother's wedding because she's just got some news about a job that was not great. So she's got to, kind of have her own space. And it opens with her at the bar, and this guy is bugging her. And Jake comes through the door, pretends to be her brother, and then says to the other guy, like, go away. And he sits at the bar for a little bit, intending to not really stay because he doesn't want to encroach on her like that first guy did. But they end up really hitting it off and having a great romance. It's very, very smutty. I think they slept together like 6 times, and it's a 2-hour audiobook. Anyway, it was a 4-star read for me. I really enjoyed their connection. There was just enough story and character for me to be invested in the characters and not just the smut of the story. And I thought, okay, this has that spark, so I'm keen to continue. And that's why I'm also enjoying Pucking Around, but I'll talk about that another time. Basically, if you want to read a hockey romance, I would suggest reading this one because not only is it spicy, it's just a good time, and the characters actually have a little bit of grit and depth to them, which I like a lot. And then the last and most recent book I finished in January, I finished this the day before January ended, and that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, and this is the third book in their Emperor series, which is the sequel to Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and I had such a good time with this book. Something about reading it while all your friends are buzzing about the same book and reading it as well just really adds to that experience, and it was so much fun. I don't know really what I can say about this one. Basically, there is a war on the horizon and Violet is playing a pivotal part in this war. There are different political machinations, which means the tension is high, and there are conspiracies as well. The characters who have bonded dragons all manifest signets, which is like the X-Men abilities that come with bonding their dragons because they channel their magic, and it was just so expansive. I do want to know so much more, and as soon as this ended, I can't believe I read the last line and then I flipped for more and it was just the acknowledgements. How is this okay to do, Rebecca Yarros? I gave it a 4 stars, and I think the next read through I'm going to appreciate it even more because I'm sure like there's so much detail in these books and I just naturally miss them, not because I intend to, but because I'm trying to absorb everything. And I just really like the romance and how it flourished in here. In the second book, obviously that miscommunication, but then in this book, it feels like the characters really got each other and they've moved past that, they've grown, and I liked that growth. And it felt like all of the conflicts that they were experiencing were coming from around them rather than from each other, and that is such a key step forward in their relationship, which I really like to see. It was also so cool to see Violet's growth as well because she really changes through each book, and I really enjoyed her approach in this one. At certain points it took a little bit to get started, like the first 100 pages I was enjoying myself, but I was also thinking, what is the direct intent of the plot right now? And so some of it was a little bit blurry, but the intent ended up landing. We got there, we got to that point. There was drama and intensity, and I really loved it. And the audiobook narrator stresses me out because when they're reading the story and there's an action scene, which there were quite a few, it tends to speed up and it would give me heart palpitations. So that's why I went out and bought this book, because I didn't haul it in my recent book haul, which I can link. It wasn't in that video because I hadn't bought it yet, because I was planning to listen to the audiobook, but it stressed me out too much and switching very much was a benefit to me. So that is all of the books that I read in January. I am so proud of myself that I read like 6 or 7 books and I'm 94% into Pucking Around. So I almost finished it as well, but didn't quite get there. I also read roughly 100 pages of The Song Rising, but then I very much got distracted by Onyx Storm. So expect to see this in my February wrap up as well. I'm fully committing here, and I've just done my February to be read video too, so this will make an appearance in that video. But do let me know if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts were in the comments. I would love to know. If you've got any romantasy recommendations as well, or fantasy with a strong romance subplot, I think maybe that's what I prefer. Let me know in the comments because I would love to suss more out. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.